The morning sun crept over the thatched roofs, spilling its golden warmth upon the waking village. Birds sang from the tall trees, and the faint sound of drums floated from the distance, carried gently by the breeze. It was the day everyone had been waiting for, the day Amina, the most graceful young woman in the village, would wed Obaid, the proud son of Chief Dallo. The entire settlement buzzed with energy. Women moved swiftly between huts, their wrappers rustling as they carried baskets filled with flowers, dyed cloth, and bowls of palm oil for the wedding rituals. Men hammered stakes for tents and tied up goats that would soon be slaughtered for the feast. Even the air smelled different that morning, of roasted maize, sweet smoke, and excitement. In our village, the narrator's voice echoed softly, a wedding is not just a union of two hearts, it is the joining of two names, two families, and sometimes two destinies. It is the day when the ancestors watch closely, when songs rise to the heavens and blessings fall like rain. Near the edge of the compound, Amina's hut was alive with color. The women had covered the mud walls with bright red and yellow fabrics. Calabashes filled with scented oil lined the floor. The laughter of young girls rang through the doorway as they teased one another about who would be the next bride. Yet, amidst the chatter, Amina sat quietly before a cracked mirror, her reflection soft and distant. Her beauty seemed untouched by the heat of the morning, skin like smooth cocoa, eyes deep and calm like the river before the storm. But her lips trembled slightly as she adjusted her coral necklace. She looked like a bride, but she felt like a prisoner in gold. Lila, her best friend since childhood, sat behind her, carefully braiding her thick black hair into long, elegant lines. "You should smile," Lila said, her voice gentle, her fingers weaving through the strands. "Today is your big day. The whole village is waiting to see you shine." Amina's eyes met Lila's reflection in the mirror. She forced a smile that faded as quickly as it came. "A smile doesn't always mean joy, my sister," she whispered. "Sometimes it's just a curtain to hide the storm." Lila paused, her hands stilling for a moment. She had known Amina long enough to recognize that tone, soft, tired, yet full of something heavy that words could not explain. "You don't want this, do you?" she asked carefully. Amina turned her gaze away, pretending to admire her dress hanging on the wall, a flowing white gown embroidered with golden beads. "It is my parents' wish," she said at last. "Chief Dallo's family will bring honor and wealth to ours. Who am I to refuse?" Outside, a woman's voice called out instructions. Laughter filled the air again, and the drums beat louder. Lila resumed braiding, but her eyes glistened. "You deserve to marry for love, not duty," she murmured. "Love?" Amina let out a soft, bitter laugh. "In this village, love is a luxury only the poor can afford." For a while the two friends said nothing. The drums continued to throb in the background, each beat echoing the steps of time drawing closer to the ceremony. Children ran past the hut, their small feet kicking up dust as they shouted, "Bride! Bride! The bride is ready." Amina's mother entered with two older women carrying cowries and oils for the final blessings. "My daughter," she said proudly, "today you will make our ancestors proud. You will walk into the house of a great man." Amina lowered her head respectfully. "Yes, Mama," she said softly. As the women began to chant prayers, Lila caught Amina's eye. Behind the obedience in her voice, behind the bow of her head, there was something else, a flicker of quiet defiance. Lila recognized it instantly. It was the look of someone who was planning something no one could yet see. Outside, the sun climbed higher, bathing the village in light. The drums grew louder, the dancers prepared, and the people gathered, waiting for the bride who would soon change more than just her name. Inside her hut, Amina sat still, her heart drumming to a rhythm different from the village's song, a rhythm only she could hear. The village square pulsed with life as the sun climbed higher, spreading light across the red earth. Drums thundered like the beating of many hearts, steady and powerful. Women spun in circles, their colorful wrappers fanning out like flowers in bloom. Men clapped and stamped their feet, singing praises to the ancestors for blessing this day. Children chased one another between the dancers, laughing, their faces smeared with dust and joy. Smoke rose from the cooking fires where pots of stew bubbled and goats roasted slowly, filling the air with a rich, festive scent. The whole village had gathered, for it was no ordinary celebration. It was the wedding of Obaid, the son of Chief Dallo, to the most admired maiden of the land, Amina. The sound of a long horn echoed from the northern path, and suddenly all movement stilled. "He's coming," someone shouted. The drummer struck a new rhythm, deeper, slower, commanding respect. From beyond the palm trees, Obaid's procession appeared, a line of proud young men dressed in gleaming white robes trimmed with gold. Their leader, Obaid himself, walked tall, his head lifted, his face shining with confidence. A white feather was tucked into his beaded headband, and a lion-tooth pendant rested on his chest, the mark of a warrior and a man of status. Behind him, his friends carried baskets filled with gifts, large yams tied in pairs, a pair of bleeding goats adorned with red cloth, calabashes of palm wine, and trays of kola nuts, tokens of respect, wealth, and goodwill. The drummers changed tempo again, celebrating his arrival. The women ululated, and the elders stood to greet him, raising their hands in blessing. Chief Dallo, sitting under a decorated canopy, smiled proudly. "My son," he said loudly so all could hear, "today the ancestors smile upon you. Today you take not just a wife but a bridge between families. May your house never know emptiness." The elders nodded and echoed his words, their deep voices carrying the weight of tradition. One by one they sprinkled ground white chalk on the gifts as a sign of purity and peace. The air shimmered with excitement, with expectation, with celebration. Yet somewhere, just beneath the sound of laughter and music, there was a strange stillness. "They say joy can dance beside sorrow and not even know its neighbor," the storyteller's voice murmured, drifting between the rhythm of the drums. "Sometimes when a song grows too loud, it hides the cry of a secret." Obaid looked around, his smile unwavering. His robe caught the sunlight, blindingly white as though nothing could stain this day. But as he reached the center of the square, something caught his attention. The bride's hut, decorated with palm fronds and colorful fabrics, stood at the far edge of the celebration, silent. No laughter came from within, no singing of the maidens preparing their sister for her walk. He frowned slightly, his fingers tightening around the staff he carried. "Why is the door still closed?" he asked one of the attendants. The man shrugged nervously. "The women are preparing her, my lord," he said, trying to smile. The drummers kept playing, though their rhythm wavered as whispers rippled through the crowd. Obaid's father gestured for patience, but unease began to seep through the air like slow-moving smoke. The dancers hesitated. The elders exchanged glances. Inside her hut, Amina should have been ready to emerge, radiant and veiled, to meet her groom before the village. But the doorway remained covered, unmoving, untouched. The drums grew louder again, perhaps to chase away the growing discomfort. Yet for the first time that morning, the music did not sound like celebration. It sounded like something trying to drown its own fear. The drums faltered, one beat at a time, until the rhythm faded into silence. The women who had gone to fetch Amina stood frozen at the doorway of her hut. Their faces, moments ago glowing with excitement, were now drained of color. One of them called her name softly, as though afraid the sound itself might bring bad luck. "Amina? Child? It is time." But there was no answer, only the low hum of flies circling around the oil lamps that still burned from the early morning rituals. Inside the hut the air felt heavy. The mirror still stood on the mat, catching a thin beam of sunlight through the doorway. On the ground lay her wedding veil, half-folded and stained with dust. The coral jewelry that should have been around her neck and wrists was scattered across the floor. Even the ceremonial beads, the ones blessed by the elders at dawn, had rolled into a corner. The mat she had been sitting on was empty, the space cold where she had once knelt. A gasp escaped from one of the women. "She is gone," she cried out. Another covered her mouth, shaking her head. "It cannot be," she whispered. "The bride cannot vanish on her wedding day." The cries reached outside, and soon the joyful noise of celebration twisted into murmurs of confusion. The music stopped completely. People looked toward the hut, their dancing feet suddenly still. The air seemed to grow colder despite the rising sun. The elders exchanged uneasy glances and Chief Dallo's smile vanished. Then, like a storm breaking, Obaid pushed his way through the crowd, his white robe brushing against startled guests. "What is this nonsense?" he barked. "Why have the drums stopped?" When he reached the hut, he saw the faces of the women, pale with shock. He forced his way inside. His eyes scanned the room, the veil, the beads, the emptiness. His breath caught. "Where is she?" His voice boomed so loudly that even the goats tied near the fence startled. "Where is my bride?" No one answered. The women dropped their gazes to the ground, trembling. One of them stammered, "We came to bring her out, my lord. But she was not here." "Not here?" Obaid's tone cracked like thunder. "Then where has she gone? Someone must have taken her." He turned toward the door, glaring at the crowd that had gathered. "Who dared to touch my bride?" The villagers began to whisper among themselves, frightened and curious. An old man spoke from the back. "I saw a stranger pass through last night," he said. "A hunter carrying traps in a bow. He was headed toward the stream. Perhaps." Before he could finish, Obaid shouted, "Bring him to me." The whisper spread like fire, "The hunter! The hunter!" Some claimed they had seen footprints near Amina's hut, prints that led into the forest. A young boy swore he heard movement in the bushes before dawn. The people clung to their words as if each rumor would make sense of the impossible. Chief Dallo raised his hand to silence them. His voice was steady but cold. "No one leaves this square. No one," he ordered. "We will search every path, every hut, every shadow if we must." He turned to his guards. "Find that hunter. Bring him here before sunset." The guards scattered, their spears glinting as they ran toward the forest edge. The villagers huddled together, fear and curiosity twisting inside them. The joy that had once filled the morning was now gone, replaced by dread. Inside her hut, Lila stood quietly near the back wall, her hands trembling. She stared at the empty mat where her friend had sat only hours before. Her heart pounded as she felt every eye turned toward her. She tried to speak, but her voice refused to come. Obaid turned to her sharply. "You were the last to see her," he said. "What happened here?" Lila swallowed hard. "She was fine when I left her," she whispered. "She said she needed a moment alone before the ceremony." "Alone?" Obaid's eyes burned with suspicion. "And then she vanished?" He stepped closer until his shadow fell across her face. "If you are hiding something—" "I swear," Lila interrupted, her voice breaking. "I don't know where she is." Obaid glared at her for a long, tense moment before storming out again. His robe, once a symbol of purity, now looked like a shroud of rage. He barked orders to the guards outside, his voice echoing through the compound. The villagers began to pray aloud, calling on ancestors to reveal the truth. Mothers clutched their children, men stood silent with furrowed brows. The scent of celebration, smoke and flowers and palm wine, now mingled with the bitter smell of fear. The narrator's voice came softly, almost mournfully. A wedding turned into a mourning, songs of joy became cries of fear. The drums that once called for dancing now beat only for truth. And as the sun dipped behind the trees, shadows lengthened over the village, whispering secrets that no one yet dared to speak. Kano crouched by the riverbank, the late afternoon sun glinting off the blade of his hunting knife as he ran a stone across its edge. The soft hiss of metal against rock blended with the hum of insects and the gentle flow of water. His small bag of traps lay open beside him, simple snares made from rope and sticks. To him, it was just another day of work, another quiet evening before he would move on to the next village. But this time, peace would not follow him. A sudden crack of twigs behind him made him turn. Before he could react, a group of men burst from the trees, spears raised, faces twisted with fury. "There he is," one shouted. "The hunter. Catch him before he runs." Kano stood quickly, gripping his knife by instinct but lowering it when he saw how many there were, at least 10 men, some he recognized from the village where he had traded meat the day before. "What is this?" he demanded, his deep voice steady though his heart quickened. "Why do you come at me like I am a beast?" "You know why," one man snarled. "You took the chief's son's bride. You think we wouldn't find out?" Kano blinked, shocked. "Bride? What bride?" They closed in around him, the circle tightening. "Don't play the fool," said another. "You were seen near her hut last night. You waited until the village slept, then you took her into the forest." "That's a lie," Kano said, raising his hands slowly. "I hunt at night, yes. But I hunt only animals, not people." He pointed toward the small pile of animal skins by the riverbank. "Look, antelope. I caught it before dawn. You can see the blood is fresh." But the men were not listening. Their anger was too thick, their fear too loud. One of them jabbed his spear toward Kano's chest. "Where is she?" Kano took a step back, frustration burning in his eyes. "I have never seen your bride," he said through clenched teeth. "I came to this place to sell meat and move on. I have no reason to harm anyone." His words only made them angrier. "He's lying," someone shouted. "Why else would he hide by the river, sharpening his knife?" "It is what hunters do," he yelled, but his voice was drowned by the noise of accusation. Within minutes, more villagers arrived. Men, women, even children. The story had spread faster than the wind. They surrounded the scene, whispering, spitting, pointing. Some looked fearful, others curious, but most were ready to believe the worst. When Chief Dallo's guards appeared, the matter was decided without question. "Bind him," the head guard ordered. The chief wants him alive. Kano struggled as rough hands grabbed his arms and tied them with thick rope. I am innocent, he shouted. Search my things, you will find no trace of your bride. But no one listened. The crowd jeered as he was dragged toward the village, his bare feet scraping the dirt. Children followed behind, chanting, "The thief! The thief!" The drums of the village, once meant for celebration, now beat like war drums announcing a capture. Back at the compound, Chief Dallo stood waiting. Obaid's eyes burned with fury as he stepped forward. "This is him?" he demanded. "Yes, my lord," the guard said. "We found him by the river with a knife." Obaid's jaw tightened. "Then let him tell us where he hid her." Kano looked around at the accusing faces. "I have told you the truth," he said quietly. "But truth means nothing when fear has already chosen its enemy." The chief frowned, considering him. "Lock him in the grain storage hut," he ordered finally. "He stays there until the bride is found. If she does not return, he will answer with his life." The guards pushed him toward the small mud brick building at the edge of the compound. Inside it was dark and smelled of dust and old harvest. They tied his hands to a wooden post and left him alone. Outside, the villagers dispersed slowly, still murmuring. Some pitied the hunter, saying his eyes looked too honest for a criminal. Others claimed that evil men often wear the face of innocence. Lila stood among them, her face pale. She said nothing, her hands trembling so slightly that only she could feel it. Her eyes lingered on the dark hut where Kano was imprisoned, then drifted toward the forest, where secrets hid in silence and truth waited, patient as the night. 3 long days passed, and the once lively village sank into a sorrowful stillness. The drums that had echoed through the air on the wedding morning were now silent. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. Smoke curled lazily from a few huts, but there was no laughter, no chatter, only whispers and heavy sighs. The village that had dressed in color now wore grief like a shroud. Each dawn began with the same cry, the voice of Amina's mother calling her daughter's name into the wind. She stood by the edge of the forest, her wrapper untied, her eyes red from sleepless nights. "Amina," she would cry again and again. "Come home, my child." But only the rustling of trees answered her. The men had split into groups to search, some along the riverbanks, some into the dense forest, others toward the rocky caves beyond the hills. They carried torches, spears, and worry in their hearts. Every snapped twig made them flinch, every strange sound turned heads. But the forest gave them nothing. Only the echo of their own footsteps returned. At the chief's compound, Obaid paced like a caged lion. His pride had been wounded, his name dragged in shame. "She humiliated me before the entire village," he growled to his friends. "She vanished like smoke, and now I am the fool left behind." One of the elders placed a hand on his shoulder. "Anger will not bring her back, my son. We must find the truth before the gods punish us all." Obaid turned away, fists clenched. "Then find it. Find whoever did this." The chief too had grown older in those few days. He sat in silence most of the time, his staff of authority resting beside him. "If she was taken," he declared to the council, "the one who did this will hang. But if she ran," he paused, eyes narrowing, "then even the spirits will not protect her." Meanwhile, the hunter Kano still sat bound in the dark hut. No food had been brought to him since morning. He spoke little, though sometimes he whispered to himself, not in madness but in prayer. Through the cracks of the wall he could see a sliver of sky. He wondered if the same sky stretched above the woman everyone thought he had stolen. Outside, life had slowed to grief. The market women no longer sang while selling their wares. Children were kept indoors. At night, the torches burned longer than usual. People feared the shadows more than they feared sleep. Amina's parents suffered the worst. Her father roamed from shrine to shrine, offering coins, goat blood, and kola nuts to the gods, begging for a sign. Her mother, weak from crying, spent her days kneeling before the small clay altar in their hut. "My daughter is good," she wept. "If she lives, let her return. If she is gone, let me go with her." Lila visited her quietly in the evenings, bringing food she could barely eat herself. She sat beside the grieving mother, her own eyes glassy. "She will come back," she said softly, though her voice trembled with guilt. The old priest of the village finally came forward. He warned that spirits were restless. "When truth hides, misfortune follows," he said. "The gods do not sleep." The villagers nodded, but none dared to speak the doubts growing in their hearts. Some still blamed the hunter. Others began to whisper that maybe Amina had run away, though no one could say where or why. The narrator's voice returned, calm yet heavy with meaning. Sometimes silence tells a louder story than words. But no one listened to silence. They searched the earth for answers while the truth sat quietly among them, breathing, waiting. As the sun set on the third day, the searchers came back empty-handed once again. The torches flickered out one by one. A dog howled in the distance. The village slept uneasily, not knowing that the truth, fragile, dangerous and alive, was closer than any of them imagined. The morning of the fourth day began like all the others, heavy, gray and wordless. The air hung thick with the weight of unanswered prayers. But fate, quiet and watchful, had its own plan for that morning. A young boy named Tano wandered through the outskirts of the village, gathering firewood for his mother's cooking fire. He hummed softly, his bare feet brushing against the dewy grass. As he neared Lila's hut, one that stood close to the banana grove, something glimmered in the soil beside a stack of dry sticks. At first he thought it was a piece of broken metal or a bead from a child's toy. But when he bent down and brushed away the dust, his eyes widened. It was gold, a necklace, delicate and beautifully crafted, with red and green beads strung around a golden pendant shaped like the moon. Every villager knew that design. It was Amina's wedding necklace, the one Obaid had placed around her neck before she disappeared. Tano froze, heart pounding. Then he did what every child would do in his place, he ran. He ran through the village shouting, "They found it! They found the bride's necklace!" Within minutes, the quiet village came alive with chaos. People poured from their huts, men, women, elders, children, all following the boy back to the spot near Lila's home. The chief's guards arrived soon after, pushing through the growing crowd. The chief himself came walking slowly, his face carved with anger. Obaid followed, his eyes burning like coals. The boy pointed at the ground. "There, my lord, I saw it shining." A guard bent down, picked up the necklace carefully and held it up for all to see. Gasps spread through the air like fire through dry grass. "Amina's necklace," someone cried. "The one she wore on her wedding morning." All eyes turned to Lila's hut. She stood in the doorway, pale and trembling, her hands clutching the edge of her wrapper. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "Lila," the chief said sternly, stepping closer. "How do you explain this?" She shook her head slowly. "I don't know, my lord. I swear I don't know how it got there." Obaid's voice cracked like thunder. "Liar. You were her closest friend. You braided her hair that morning. You knew everything about her, where she went, what she felt. Now her necklace is here? In your yard." "I didn't take her," Lila cried, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I would never harm Amina." The crowd roared with accusation. Women covered their mouths, whispering. Men muttered curses. "Betrayer," one said. "She helped the hunter." Another shouted, "She sold her friend for coin." Lila fell to her knees. "Please," she begged, "you have to believe me. I did nothing wrong." But belief had already fled from the village. The chief turned to his guards. "Bind her," he ordered. "Until we know the truth, she will be kept under watch." 2 men stepped forward and tied her wrists gently, though not without disgust. As they led her toward the chief's compound, the villagers parted, but none reached out to comfort her. Meanwhile, in the storage hut, the hunter Kano sat against the wall, staring blankly when the door burst open. "You are free," one of the guards said curtly. "The gods have shown your innocence." Kano blinked, confused. "What of the bride?" "Her necklace was found, not with you but with the girl they call Lila," the guard said, cutting his ropes. "You may go, but do not think the village forgets easily." Kano stepped into the sunlight for the first time in days, rubbing his sore wrists. The villagers watched him go with mixed feelings, some relieved, others still suspicious. The same voices that had cursed him now turned against Lila, proving how quickly blame changes its face. As she was led past the same people who once called her sister, they hurled words sharper than knives. "You hid her. You shamed us. May your tongue burn for lying." Lila didn't fight back. She didn't shout or plead anymore. Only silent tears slid down her face as her eyes drifted toward the forest, the same forest where the truth still waited, unseen and unspoken. The narrator's voice closed the scene softly, almost like a whisper carried by the wind. A friend's loyalty can be mistaken for crime when truth hides its face. And in that moment, the village forgot what it meant to know a heart, they only remembered what it meant to fear a secret. That night, the village slept under a heavy silence. The moon hung low, veiled behind drifting clouds, as if the heavens themselves were weary of the chaos below. Crickets sang softly, and a cool wind carried the scent of wet soil through the quiet paths. In the chief's compound, Guards sat by Lila's hut, their torches flickering weakly. They whispered about her guilt, their eyes half closed with fatigue. The night had stretched long, too long. Then just past midnight, one guard straightened suddenly. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. A faint rustle came from the trees. Both men peered into the darkness. From the shadows, a figure slowly emerged, cloaked in a rough farmer's cloth, the face hidden beneath a worn headscarf. The guards stood, spears ready. "Who goes there?" one demanded. The figure raised trembling hands. "Please," a voice said softly, "do not fear. I come to speak truth." The sound of that voice froze the air. It was soft yet familiar, a voice that many had thought was gone forever. The guards stepped closer, their torches lighting the figure's face. And then their eyes widened. It was Amina. Her skin was pale from days spent hiding, her once polished wedding beads gone, replaced by dust and dirt. But her eyes still held the same quiet strength, the same sadness that Lila had seen on the morning of the wedding. "By the gods," one guard whispered. "The bride, she's alive." Without waiting, they rushed to alert the chief. Within minutes, torches flared across the compound, voices rose in disbelief, and villagers began stumbling from their huts, half-dressed, drawn by the commotion. Amina stood at the center of it all, trembling, ashamed but resolute. Chief Dallo appeared, leaning heavily on his staff. Obaid followed, his expression unreadable. Lila was brought from her hut, hands still bound, tears streaming down her cheeks as she saw her friend standing there. Amina turned toward the elders and fell to her knees. "Please," she said, her voice breaking. "Do not punish anyone. The fault is mine. I am the one who brought this shame." A stunned silence followed. Even the wind seemed to stop. She took a deep breath and began her confession. "I did not disappear because I was taken. No one stole me. I ran away." The murmurs started at once, a wave of disbelief rippling through the crowd. But Amina raised her hand weakly. "Please let me speak." She looked toward her parents first. "Mother, father, I know what you wanted for me. You wished me a life of honor, wealth, and respect. But the man you chose, Obaid, I could not love him. My heart already belonged to another." The chief frowned. "To another?" "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. "To Tunde, the drummer from the neighboring village. We met at the harvest festival last year. He is poor but his heart is kind. I begged you to let me choose him, but you said a chief's son was destiny. You said love was a luxury only fools believed in." Her mother covered her face, sobbing quietly. Her father stood rigid, torn between anger and sorrow. Amina continued, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The night before the wedding I told Lila everything. I couldn't marry Obaid. I couldn't live a life chosen for me. Lila begged me not to do anything foolish, but when dawn came she helped me. She gave me her brother's old cloak and led me through the back path before the drummers began to play. She hid me in an abandoned hut across the river. We thought no one would notice until nightfall, but—" Her voice cracked. "In my hurry I left my necklace behind. I didn't mean to. When I realized it was too late, the village was already searching." She turned toward Lila, whose face was streaked with tears. "My sister, you should never have suffered for my choice. You protected me when I was too weak to protect myself." The crowd murmured again, this time not with anger but confusion, disbelief, pity. "And the hunter?" Chief Dallo asked slowly. Amina shook her head. "He was innocent. He never saw me. I only heard his name after I hid. I wanted to return to confess but fear held me back. I thought I would be cast out forever. But when I heard Lila was taken, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer." Her voice dropped to a whisper that carried through the night like a prayer. "I did not run because I hated you. I ran because I wanted to breathe. I wanted to choose love, not obligation. I wanted to be free." The elders sat silent for a long while, their faces unreadable. The firelight flickered over their wrinkled skin, reflecting years of wisdom and weariness. Finally the oldest among them spoke. "The gods test us not through thunder, but through the quiet choices of the heart. This girl did not sin with greed or malice. She only followed her spirit's cry for freedom." The chief sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead. "The shame still stands," he said, "but truth has spoken. The innocent will be freed." He gestured toward Lila, and the guards untied her ropes. She stumbled forward, embracing Amina tightly. Both wept openly, their tears washing away days of fear. Obaid watched them in silence. When he finally spoke, his tone was strangely calm. "You should have told me," he said. "I would not have forced you. I may not have loved you, but I am not without heart. Amina bowed her head. Forgive me, Obaid. I thought you would hate me. He looked at her for a long moment, then turned away. Go and live your freedom. But remember, freedom often costs more than chains. The narrator's voice drifted gently as the torches dimmed and the crowd dispersed, still murmuring about the night's miracle. She had not been stolen by a man's hands, but by her own spirit's cry for freedom. And though her return lifted the weight of lies, it also reminded the village that truth, once hidden, always leaves its shadow behind. The following morning the entire village gathered in the council yard. The sun was bright, yet its warmth felt harsh and unforgiving. Amina stood before the circle of elders, her head bowed, her wrists trembling though no rope bound her now. Lila stood beside her, quiet but firm, ready to face whatever came. Around them, villagers crowded under the shade of acacia trees, men, women, children, all waiting to hear what judgment would fall upon the girl who had turned their world upside down. At the center sat the council of elders, 7 men and 2 women, each old enough to carry both wisdom and scars. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the occasional crackle of a fire and the distant cry of a crow. Chief Dallo sat on his carved stool, his face carved in stone. To his right stood Obaid, his eyes dark with humiliation. An elder man rose first, leaning on his staff. The matter before us is grave, he began. A bride chosen by our chief's family fled her marriage. Her act brought shame upon 2 houses and confusion to the entire village. Even the spirits of our ancestors have been disturbed. Such disobedience cannot go unpunished. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some in agreement, some in doubt. Another elder nodded solemnly. Yes. In our father's time, this would have been seen as rebellion. The order of marriage is the order of peace. When a woman defies it, she defies her people. Obaid's mother, standing beside the women of her family, spoke sharply. She humiliated my son before the gods and before men. How can there be forgiveness for that? If others follow her example, there will be no respect left for families, for elders, or for tradition. The crowd stirred. Some nodded. Others looked uneasy. Then, from among the villagers, a woman stepped forward, her back slightly bent with age but her voice clear and strong. It was Nana Efua, the oldest woman in the village, known for her wisdom and fairness. The guards tried to stop her, but the elders gestured for her to speak. She looked slowly around the circle before speaking. I have listened, she said, to the words of men and the cries of mothers. But I will speak for the heart of a woman. If a bird flies from a cage, do we blame the sky for opening above it? Or do we ask why the cage was built so small? The words hung in the air like a bell's echo. The crowd murmured again, this time softer, thoughtful. She turned toward Amina. This girl did not bring shame. She brought truth, a truth that frightens us because it is the one we bury in silence. She wanted love, not gold. Freedom, not fear. If she must be punished, let it be for her honesty, not for her courage. Several women nodded, murmuring in agreement. But some of the men bristled. One rose and slammed his staff into the ground. You speak of courage, but her courage has wounded our customs. If every woman chooses her own will, chaos will follow. There must be order or the village will crumble. The debate grew louder, voices rising, arguments clashing like thunder. The elders leaned together, whispering among themselves. At last, the chief raised his hand for silence. He stood slowly, his gaze sweeping over the faces before him. We are torn between heart and tradition, he said. But a judgment must be made. He looked at Amina, his voice heavy. Your act cannot be forgotten. Though you meant no harm, you brought dishonor to my house and confusion to my people. The law cannot let this pass. Amina's knees weakened, but she lifted her head, her eyes glistening. I will accept whatever the council decides. After a long pause, the chief spoke the final words. You will leave this village before the next sunrise. You may go wherever your heart calls you, but you may never return. Your name will not be cursed, but it will not be spoken again within these walls. A gasp spread through the crowd, half relief, half sorrow. Then he turned to Lila. You are free. Your loyalty blinded you, but your intention was not wicked. Go home to your family. Lila stepped forward and embraced Amina tightly, both women crying quietly as the villagers watched. The elders dismissed the crowd and slowly people drifted away, some whispering in anger, others in quiet respect. As Amina walked toward the edge of the village later that day, carrying nothing but a small bundle of clothes and her courage, the narrator's voice lingered softly. Judgment may come from the mouths of men, but the heart's truth belongs to no council. Sometimes exile is not a punishment, It is freedom walking its rightful path. The night before Amina's departure was quieter than any night the village had ever known. Even the crickets seemed to hush as though mourning her exile. The moonlight spilled softly over the clay roofs, touching the path that led to the forest, the path she would walk at dawn alone. Inside Lila's hut, the two friends sat facing each other. Between them lay a small bundle, a few clothes, some dried fruit, and the necklace that had caused so much pain. Amina had asked for it back, not to wear, but to keep as a reminder of everything she had endured, and everything she had learned. Lila folded the last piece of cloth and tied the bundle firmly. "You shouldn't go alone," she whispered, her voice trembling. Amina smiled faintly. "I won't be alone," she said softly. "The wind will walk with me and so will your kindness." Lila reached out and held her friend's hands tightly. "You changed everything," she said. "Even if they call it shame, it won't stay that way forever. One day the daughters of this village will thank you." Amina's eyes filled with tears. "If they do, tell them I was not brave, only tired of being silent." Outside, the first faint light of dawn began to paint the sky with pale gold. The village still slept, its heart heavy with judgment and regret. Amina rose quietly, took her small bundle, and walked toward her family's hut one last time. Inside, her parents slept on mats beside the dying embers of the fire. Amina knelt by their side, her heart aching. She placed a folded letter on the wooden stool near her mother's hand. It was written in her delicate, careful script. "My dearest parents, forgive me for the pain I have caused. I did not wish to shame you. I only wished to live the truth of my heart. You taught me love, and it is that love that gave me the courage to choose my own path. May the gods protect you and may you one day understand. Your daughter, Amina." She lingered there for a moment, her eyes glistening in the flickering firelight, then quietly rose and stepped into the cool morning mist. Lila followed her as far as the edge of the forest. They embraced once more, holding each other as if the world might fall apart the moment they let go. "Go," Lila whispered, "and never look back." Amina nodded, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Then she turned and walked down the path, her bare feet brushing against the damp earth. The mist wrapped around her like a cloak of mercy, hiding her from the village that had cast her out. As she walked, a sound reached her ears, faint at first, then stronger. The steady, rhythmic beat of a drum. Her heart quickened. She knew that sound, she had heard it in her dreams for weeks. Through the mist ahead, a familiar figure appeared, Tunde, the drummer. His clothes were simple, his eyes filled with hope and disbelief as he saw her approach. Behind him stood a small group of travelers, merchants heading toward the next village. Tunde dropped his drum and ran to her. They met in the middle of the path, breathless, their hands finding each other as though they had never been apart. Neither spoke, words would only weaken the moment. Finally he whispered, "I prayed you'd come." Amina smiled through her tears. "And I prayed you'd still be waiting." Together they turned toward the rising sun. The travelers greeted her kindly, and soon the small group began its journey down the long, winding road. Tunde carried his drum slung over his shoulder, and as they walked, he began to play, a slow, steady rhythm that echoed across the valley like the heartbeat of freedom itself. The narrator's voice returned, calm and full of warmth. "Some stories don't end in celebration but in freedom, and that too is a kind of happiness." Amina's footsteps did not fade into sorrow, they became the sound of courage walking toward a new dawn. Months passed, and though her name was not spoken in the village, whispers still traveled with the wind. Traders returning from distant lands brought curious tales of a young woman and a drummer who had built a small school by the river in another village. They taught children how to read, but more importantly, they taught girls to dream, to choose their own paths, to live without fear, to speak their truth. Some said she wore her old necklace when she taught, its golden beads catching the sun like tiny sparks of hope. Others said she had buried it in the earth, as an offering to freedom itself. Whatever the truth, her story lived on, not as gossip but as legend. And somewhere in the distance, carried by the wind, the faint sound of drumming still rose and fell, as if reminding the world that love, courage and choice will always find their rhythm again. Amina's story lingered in the hearts of the villagers long after her footsteps had vanished beyond the horizon. It was told in hushed tones around fires, in the pauses between chores, in the quiet evenings when the wind swept across the fields. Some spoke of her with pity, others with admiration, but none could deny that something in the village had changed after she left. The silence that once carried shame now carried questions, and questions have a way of stirring truth. The narrator's voice rose like a gentle wind, weaving through the smoke and stars. Amina's story became a whisper carried by the wind. Some called her cursed, others called her wise. But in truth she was both, a woman brave enough to choose her own destiny. Around the fire, the storyteller paused, gazing at the faces lit by the orange glow. The children leaned forward, eyes wide, while the elders stared into the flames, their thoughts heavy. The drums that once played for weddings and festivals had been silent since her disappearance. But now, faintly, their rhythm began to return, not in celebration of a union but in remembrance of a lesson. The storyteller continued, his tone deep and thoughtful. In our world, obedience is praised and silence is mistaken for virtue. But sometimes silence is a chain, and breaking it is the only way to breathe. Amina did not run from love, she ran toward it. She did not defy her people, she simply dared to listen to her heart when no one else would. The flames crackled softly and a warm wind stirred the dust at their feet. The villagers sat still, the story washing over them like a long-awaited rain. Some felt shame for the way they had judged her. Others felt pride, though they did not say it aloud. The truth of Amina's choice had become larger than her life. It had become a mirror reflecting the quiet struggles of many. Sometimes, the storyteller said, breaking the rules is not rebellion, it is survival. Sometimes a missing bride is not lost, she is found. A hush fell over the crowd. In that silence, something sacred moved, a realization that freedom was not always grand or loud. It could be a simple walk through mist, a letter left behind, a drumbeat shared with a kindred soul. Amina's act of courage had not destroyed her people's traditions. It had reminded them that tradition without compassion is only another form of captivity. The storyteller lifted his eyes toward the night sky, where the stars shimmered faintly above the palm trees. The gods, he said, do not always speak through thunder or prophecy. Sometimes they speak through a girl who dares to walk away. As the fire burned lower, the drums began to play again, slowly at first, then stronger. Their rhythm echoed through the fields, a heartbeat of freedom pulsing through the night. It was not the rhythm of celebration but of awakening. The women began to hum softly, their voices joining the wind, while the men nodded silently, lost in thought. In the hearts of those who listened, a seed had been planted, the idea that love and choice are sacred, that courage may sometimes wear the face of defiance. And though Amina would never return, her spirit lived on in the songs, in the stories, and in the quiet bravery of every girl who dared to dream beyond the fence of expectation. The narrator's final words settled gently, like ashes after a sacred fire. Remember this, my children, sometimes breaking rules saves a soul. Sometimes the one who walks away teaches the village how to see. And though her name may fade, her truth will never die. As the drums continued under the moonlight, the village understood. The story of the missing bride was not one of loss, but of finding the courage to be free.